Welcome back to my channel. Let's get started. I do want to thank our sponsor. That's Tandem. This is a place where you guys can get your own self-custody wallet going. And if you're not doing self-custody, you should get into that. It's a very easy process with Tandem. All you have to do is just visit their website, use our link down below. It's going to give you a little bit of a discount and you can start, moving some assets on there. You don't have to go overboard, but I think you will start to learn. Self-custody is actually pretty cool. Check it out and let me know what you guys think. Let's get into a few points here. I had Mr. McAlery on yesterday at Canary Capital. We did a nice show with him and he said something to me that I was a little bit surprised at, and he said he thought that Solana would not reach its all-time high in this market again. What's your opinion? I think I know where it's going to be, but what's your opinion? I mean, that makes me even more bullish. Okay. And look, there's so many tailwinds behind Solana. Where do I start? Number 1, let's focus on the institutional side. There's an ETF that's already approved with staking, the first ETF ever to be approved with staking. There are a number of other ETFs that are likely going to be approved at some point this summer. You have the Solana treasury companies like DeFi Development Corp, Core Soul Strategies, and Upexi all trading well above their respective M&As. There is an institutional interest in Solana for building on Solana. Franklin Templeton, Fidelity, some of the biggest asset managers and banks in the world are also building on Solana. In fact, Fidelity months ago had job descriptions for Solana engineers. It's not even close in terms of effectively every KPI that one would be of interest to evaluate the value of a blockchain. Now it's starting to make its way into traditional finance, which will only strengthen it as a whole. Coinbase assets came in and they're dropping and adding support for pumped off fund. This will be on the Solana network. Obviously, we're talking about that, but when you look at this, do you feel like this proves out that meme coins are not over just yet? Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been saying this for years now. I get asked repeatedly, because was the first institutional fund manager to buy meme coins in 2023, and it was a huge driver of our performance for that year. People ask me, is it over? And I'm like, think about meme coins like software releases, right? So you've got a 1.0, a 2.0, a 3.0, a 4.0. That's effectively what happens with meme coins, or frankly any sort of narrative in crypto in general. And I think one of the most interesting things about a pump out fund is that number 1, they're attempting to enable, streamers and content creators to have these kind of creator coins that they can monetize directly as opposed to just getting paid, through Twitch or whatever. But 2, and I think this gets back to the original question, we just did $500 million raised on chain. Not 100% of it, but most of it was raised on chain in less than 12 minutes. So there's now a very strong case study for capital formation at global scale on chain on Solana, and Pump was the first one to really do that. Now you look at the performance of Poly Market. Now we've got a situation maybe where Poly Market is starting. You think Polygon to a certain extent, Poly Market getting a lot of open blue lane now that they are out from underneath this investigation. What is your opinion on this? Is Solana potentially losing maybe the gambler side of the market, which are these small bets like the $10 to $100 range, into what's happening over on the Polygon chain? Do you think there's any concern there on that? No, not really. And I think part of it is number 1, hats off to Poly Market for building such an amazing business. But these prediction markets have existed in other venues before blockchains existed. So I think builders today will look at what platform am I going to be building on, and that's likely going to be Solana, and the data actually supports this. If you look at the latest Electric Capital Developer Survey from last year, the majority of the growth is all happening with Solana. So if anything, Polyarchet's success is validating the market, and there's going to be other competitors in the space, and I think that they will be building on Solana. Okay. So you think they're going to build on Solana? Of course, right here you can kind of see the US Department of Justice ends their investigation with Poly Market. That's going to be a good sign for him, and likelihood as you see it right there. Poly Market Foundation. We're going to see a token launch. You feel like it's going to happen on Solana? What do you think the valuation is going to go to on this thing? Where does it trade? I have no idea. I mean, yeah, if you look at what happened with Pump. Now granted, Pump Fun is probably the fastest company to ever get to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. There's a lot of excitement around that deal. There's a lot of excitement around Poly Market. So, it's a delicate balancing act. Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that. Listen, it's going to play out in a very unique way. We're going to be watching it very closely. Bybit 70 million, you get it. There's a list right there. Kraken, OKX, Phantom, Solflare. This rolls into 200 million users that have access to X stocks. This is huge. Do you think that maybe Solana being first, I should say within the Solana ecosystem being first, is a win, or do you think the rolling of what we're seeing around Arbitrum and Robinhood obviously, and most likely other sophisticated trading firms going on chain as well? Do you think there's going to be a demand across all markets, or you think Solana could maybe take an edge on this? Coinbase launched Boss and it's been wildly successful as a revenue generating product for Coinbase. Coinbase is a publicly traded company. They need to drive value to their shareholders. Robinhood is also a publicly traded company that needs to drive value to their shareholders. It makes sense that they would also then do an L2 where they can capture all the fees from the sequencer. Now, if you flip that to the ones that you showed on that screen from Phantom to OKX to Kraken, etc., that's a different approach. Because even though Kraken, yes, is a private company and OKX is, yes, a private company, a for-profit company, I think there's a delineation between we want to control the experience to generate revenue versus we want to be enabling our network of users to gain access to these stocks. And I think that approach is going to serve folks really well, because the amount of liquidity and trading capabilities that are only possible on Solana will ensure that more and more people are gaining access to these things versus having to go through, say, a US-based entity or a KYC approach through like a Coinbase or Robinhood. Yeah. Well, I think the non-KYC scenario that plays into this, especially for international, that's a huge factor. If you look at a D5 Llama right here, Hypearl kind of leading the space right there, but Jupiter and Drift right behind it in reality. So, could this be a scenario where Jupiter starts to get an edge here and makes a run at Hyperlid? What do you think the future of Jupiter is going to be in terms of growth? Yeah, look, you have to give credit to the Hyperliquid team. They've built an amazing product. They've captured the mind share. They did amazing airdrop. Nothing but respect for that team and what they've built. I think some of the upcoming changes to Solana's core as well as the validators that are going to be running on the network will make the benefit of Hyperlid being an L1 that has effectively an on-chain order book baked into it irrelevant. I think you will start to see some of the things that are coming in the future for Solana, and these per exchanges, whether it's Jupiter, Drift, etc., are going to be able to utilize these new capabilities so that you don't have the kind of friction with an on-chain order book that you have today on Solana that's going to change in the future. So I think it's less about is Jupiter or Drift going to make a run for Hyperlid just based on that this tokenized stocks or some other asset. It's more about the fundamental changes to the validator clients and the core software on the network that's going to enable any DEX to be able to compete with Hyper. Yeah, that's the thing I think that's exciting to me, is that we're going to see really a leveling of that playing field out there, and obviously this would be huge for Solana. Other things that we've been talking about here on the show is these treasury companies. Now there's a handful of treasury companies percolating up on Solana. Here's Cantor talking about this right there. DFDV up, you mentioned it earlier right there. And CNQ, when you look at that and the fact that Cantor is saying these things are undervalued like they're undervalued, do you believe that is the case right now? And if so, what do you think the market is going to do to respond to that? Yeah, so I think the market is going to tell you if it's over or undervalued, and the way that these treasury companies are valued is based on what's called a NAV, the multiple against their net asset value. And so MicroStrategy is the canonical example of this. They trade around a 2x NAV. They got roughly $70 billion worth of Bitcoin. Their market cap is roughly double that, right? Are these Solana treasury companies undervalued relative to their NAVs? It depends on your view of what they can do in the future, because the key difference with a Solana treasury company versus a Bitcoin one is Bitcoin, they only basically have access to the capital markets to get cheap debt or share offerings to go buy more Bitcoin, which is great, but there's no operating company because Solana is a proof-of-stake network. These companies like DFTV and Sol Strategies etc. will stake the SOL, they have to earn that yield, and so the market is likely going to value these companies based on what I see as a Solana hurdle rate. That means the price of SOL going up coupled with the inflation rate. If they're able to generate yield above that hurdle rate, the market should actually price them higher. I think that's going to be the case for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. You're going to have a winner takes most in each one of these. I don't know which one it will be, but ultimately each of these companies is going to be focused on accumulating as much of that cryptocurrency. My obvious opinion here is that Bitcoin is going to remain the asset and Solana is going to be the infrastructure. And if you see Solana as being the infrastructure, you will have the ability for folks to invest Solana into the Web3 community protocols and projects and generate that additional yield. Well, which is huge. I think a lot of people haven't put their heads around this. That's a seismic shift in how you would invest in companies, especially in the way they're going to perform. With all of that happening and you think about where Seeker is right now, you're already seeing 500 sign up. This is right here just on the Solana mobile hackathon. This is probably going to launch with just a heap load of DAPs, in terms of overall. Do you think this is still underestimated right now, the Seeker and the ecosystem it might bring? I've been saying this for years that I think mobile is going to be the thing that onboards billions of people into crypto, and it's because it's likely going to be mostly abstracted away, and the beauty of the Solana phones is they have the signing capabilities of your wallet baked into the device. Furthermore, you mentioned the Bonka airdrop that kind of drove a lot of excitement around the saga. That's true. And what's fascinating about that is it's a new way of going to market for new projects and protocols, right? They could just airdrop, whatever to various people's wallets, or they could be like, we're going to do an airdrop on the Seeker and now we're going to have, front page real innovative way of improving one's go-to-market, because you're also getting a very targeted audience of people who are owning the Solana phones, and I think it also in a way helped Solana in general because it opened up the treasure trove of how marketing for Web3 could be done. You were there in November of 23 calling this exact same thing bonk. It's that simple. So that's right. If you compare bonk and what's happening over on on-chain summer with base, which one do you think does better right now in this hyperactive market, especially with Seeker getting ready to launch next month? Bonk. It's that simple. Here's why, right? So number one, the bonk team, and it's a team. They are product people, they're marketers, they're community members. And bonk has, just under 1 million wallet holders today. That's those three things combined make them a valuable startup, but they're not a startup. They're a team of, bonk community members that continue to ship products and do events and do marketing and raise awareness for the broader Solana community. And their recent success has to do with their Pump Fund competitor, right? So they created Let's Bonk, and in the past couple of weeks they've completely taken almost all the market share away from Pump Fund, and in doing so they're generating close to $1 million a day in fees, and those fees are then about half of them go to buying and burning bonk, which of course reduces the supply, but more importantly, and I think this is a key thing to underscore for why bonk is so powerful in the ecosystem, they're not just selling all of their soul and hitting, buying and burning bonk. They're taking some of that and staking it. They're actually contributing back to the network and helping secure the network and show people that, hey, we're aligned with the long-term vision of Solana. Yes, of course, we're going to go buy and burn bonk as well, but we're not just dumping hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Solana on the open market. So from my perspective, the momentum behind bonk is a kind of product company, if you will, even though they're not a company, coupled with how the community has just consistently rallied behind them. Yeah, I think it's ridiculously underpriced. Well, I'm looking at the chart right now, deck screener. This thing's up 200% really if you look back all the way just to April. I'm into July right now and it still hasn't really kind of hit its stride just yet, even though Solana has moved. How this correlates to the traditional markets with Bitcoin, trading on a high here this week at 123 could get interesting. Another area that I think is going to get interesting is the fidgetal concept, because this is something that the company Fidgets, they've talked about this before. The whole idea is that they are now releasing a connection to a Pokédex Pokemon, and this could play into the Seeker. So, we might see possibly another strategy where another company might take the same route of where this might go for where the Seeker was with, where the saga was with bonk. The Seeker could be with maybe a new project like a Fidgel. So, I'm intrigued. And let's be clear, Pokemon Go was one of the most successful, mobile apps ever. And it had caused a serious amount of interest from, Pokemon fans and players, and then new people out there together. And I think that might be the case with them doing this thing with the Seeker phone as well. Yeah. Well, you got it right here. Solana Seeker holders now are going to be able to get a free Pokemon card, and this is a big community, guys. So think about this as a physical and a digital component. Maybe this is the point where something goes viral on Solana. Viral not in our crypto bubble, but truly viral. Maybe Pokemon is going to be the one that goes there. The other thing I wanted to hit on is what's happening over on X. Grok is now generating, and I guess we're going to have AI agents within that looks very similar to Luna right there, which is kind of interesting, and there's going to be a whole bunch of them right there. So when you look at that Solana integration, do you think we see maybe some kind of Solana integration with X, especially around agents? Look, they recently hired a very famous product person out of Silicon named Nikita as their head of product, and he is an advisor to Solana. Now that does not guarantee that Solana is integrated into something like X. Okay. But this guy knows product really well and has been interested in advising Solana for quite some time. I do think that the real-time nature of XT Twitter requires a blockchain that is real-time, and today that really only is Solana. Now behind the scenes you can also see the wallet creation, management, etc. being abstracted away. So you have companies like Privy that was just acquired by Stripe. You've got an asymmetric portfolio coming like Turnkey that's enabling wallets and private key management to be abstracted away. This makes the user experience way easier for normies. So right there is a potential that you could see Solana being the backing to something like this on X, and you may not even know it exists. If you look at virtuals right now, and we've been covering virtuals for quite some time, it's been a little bit sideways here, but I think this is still one of the most undervalued. And you look at the whole ecosystem, and this is my point from the topic of today's show, is that is Solana setting up maybe to replace some of the big tech companies out here? I've got a clip I want to play for you and get your opinion. Let's go to this clip. We had to make the announcement that we were going to move on. But there was a working version of this. This wasn't just vaporware. Oh, no. Of course. Yeah. There's this narrative out there that it was Demore only. No, it was you marketed it though. You showed this. Yeah. How did that happen? Really? And I'm not the expert here. Well, again, as Craig said, we thought we were going to deliver it by the end of the year. You're also Apple. I mean, you've got more engineers, more cash. Why couldn't you make it work? I mean, this is new technology. Siri should be as good, if not better, than the competition. It should be. That's not right now. That's certainly our mission. Yeah. But that's our mission. But we want to do it the right way. When's the right way going to come along? Well, in this case, we really want to make sure that we have it very much in hand before we start talking about dates for obvious reasons. And will that include these features that you had previously announced and more? I mean, is this the effort to make Siri this more interactive AI companion? Well, I mean, look, on the one hand, I would love to dish about my enthusiasm for our future plans, but that's exactly what we don't want to do right now, right? To be honest, I'm not really a big user of Apple Intelligence. I'm using a lot of your competitors' products. It's important to realize our strategy is a little bit different than some other people. What about other devices to do that? You probably saw that Johnny 4 is linked up with OpenAI to create some sort of future AI device. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't either. Yeah. Is this a space that Apple's looking at? Is something that is more personal? Maybe you wear it. Glasses. Alright. So, they got put on the hot seat. That's of course Frederick from Apple, one of the key product guys over there. What do you think this is going to look like in the next few years? Yeah. Look, Apple is probably the best hardware company on the planet. MHM. They're not good at software historically. And if you just go back 1015 years to the Apple Maps debacle where it was the wrong addresses, the directions, historically Apple is not great at software. They're really good at hardware. And so I do think that something like Solana and the Seeker is not meant to, disrupt or take over Apple. More importantly, Seeker is going to force the hands of people like Apple and Google to enable crypto signing capabilities on the device. So, when you do Face ID today on your iPhone, there's crypto, APIs in there. They just don't open it up to developers. So, eventually they may do that, especially with all the regulations that are getting passed this year around crypto. I think it's not a matter of if, it's when. And in that scenario, Apple and certainly Google would both benefit from this massive wave of new types of technologies. And again, because Apple is so focused on user experience, they have to go with a chain that enables a seamless experience. That chain is Solana. Yeah. Well, And you look at the strategies what we've seen with Android and with Samsung. Look at how fast they were able to position in the market against, and again that's Samsung that's opening up their element especially around the development and new devs and expanding the ecosystem. So I would agree with you, there is a big opportunity here. Last clip I have for you and then we'll get into your opinion on this one because this is kind of the other crux of the show. Let's go to Jim Cramer. For the past month or so Apple's been trading sideways, basically hugging the $200 level. There are renewed concerns about the App Store, too. And now we need to worry about what the numbers will look like when Apple reports again at the end of July. Now, write this down. That means down about 20 points from here. I certainly don't want to see it revisit that level. It's something we talked about, by the way, at our charitable trust meeting later this week. That's the level. But if for some reason the stock gets clobbered, you know what? Let's back up the truck at 180. Which is why I'm simply not ready to give up on this one. 180. That's the level. Alright. So, did Cramer just doom Apple at 180? And I mean, if you look at all the things here, no AI, they've got a fatigued hardware line to your point, great hardware makers, but a fatigued line. And you've got all of these projects and companies and tech nipping at their heels. No longer are they small. Solana, what the potential is with Seeker. It may show the path for someone like an Android, a Samsung and a whole plethora of, phone makers that would say, hey, yeah, we're going this direction and blockchain is going to be the answer here. Do you think that has doomed Apple's future here? No. I would never bet against Apple. I mean, number one, their corporate balance sheet has enormous amounts of cash on it. And so, I think the kind of let's go back a few months when there was the executive at Apple that was saying like, we're going to be moving away from potentially from Google for search because of the AI stuff, and Google's stock got hammered, and since then Google has ripped right back. I think any of these kind of headlines are really for driving fast money traders. And to be clear, Apple is a favorite short of hedge funds when they're long, say Meta or Tesla or something else as a pair trade. So I think, betting against Apple long term probably a bad idea. I think the doomerism of a company like Apple is just misguided. Will they have some potential struggles? Yes. But that has been the case for decades, and I think they'll be just fine longer term. Well, I think they've got a position, and obviously their struggles on the Apple vision. Now we've seen they've launched out with a whole new vision of wear and what we may see as wearables. Then of course you have the gaming side of crypto, Solana being the gaming chain. Apple not really playing into that. And yet we've got probably look at Shaga right here. GeForce now $20 a month. Xbox Cloud 19 Shaga $10, So that's just an example. And you're talking about billions of gamers, guys, out there in the market. This is a huge opportunity. Do you think that cloud gaming is going to consistently be cheaper on Solana? And if so, why wouldn't Solana just win in that alone? Yeah. So, actually, when I worked at Microsoft in the cloud and AI organization years ago, I was privy to some of the teams that were doing this for Xbox. I will say that streaming video in and of itself is an incredibly non-trivial engineering exercise. Streaming video games is just as hard, if not harder. And so if you're going to supplant the current infrastructure for say streaming video games with a Web3 technology, you would need it to be something like Solana in the future. Solana has a significant number of upgrades that are coming that are going to enable it to be incredibly fast, enabling effectively a Web 2 style experience. So if you have the real-time streaming of the video content from your video games, but the game playing in any of the kind of assets or weapons etc. that people may be consuming or trading or using within the game, Solana will enable that in the future. I think Solana is the chain that's going to enable real-time experiences in general, and video games is certainly one of those. Interesting. Listen Joe, it's always fun to have you on the show, and thanks so much for letting us pick your brain. I appreciate you stopping in. Thanks again. My pleasure. You bet. Alright, you guys. If we're going to have a lot more content of obviously around Solana and many other projects that we of course dive into here. If you're not part of the channel right now, first of all, subscribe, like and comment. We'll catch you next time right here.